but I didn't sign up for this to be the maintenance guy.
Yeah.
So the any moment, I took the tools out of the truck so I wouldn't be tempted. And that was the last time I was the maintenance guy.
This is the Yield Coach Show, episode 46. Hey everybody, this is your coach Ian Brown. A few announcements. Yield Coach Capital has opened its doors to investors looking to multiply their money while working with yours truly and our varsity investment team. We recently closed our 170-acre Gainesville, Florida industrial tract, and our limited partner investors are on pace to make 2.5 times or more on their money. That opportunity is gone, but don't miss the next one. Be sure to join our investor list and never miss a deal again. You can join our investor list by the portal, which is in the show notes of this podcast. It's in our Instagram bio link, and you can also do it at yield-coach.com. If you join our investor list, we will get you the free gift, 107 questions to ask a deal sponsor, and a discount to our Employee to Entrepreneur video course, which is packed full of information and case studies to kickstart your investment success. Now is your time to take the field. I'm your host, Ian Brown. Every episode, we bring you dynamic entrepreneurs, real estate investors, thought leaders, and inspirational guests ready to open up, share their story, the good, the bad, the ugly, so you can learn lessons, gain advantages, and accelerate your own success. Today, I am joined by our guest, Tony Castronovo. Very excited to have Tony on the show. He brings a wealth of knowledge. He is the founder and managing partner of Novo Multifamily Group and Novo Investments. He has a construction background. He's good at strategic renovations, forcing appreciation through these renovations and asset management. Can't wait to hear about that. He's also partnered in over 900 multifamily units. Tony, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Ian. It's awesome to be here, and I appreciate that intro.
Oh, of course. Look forward to get to know you a little bit better. It's interesting. The biggest weakness in my background is actually construction. So I kind of like to have somebody on the show. I came through appraisal, brokerage, and law. All the paper masteries. But the guys that have been on the site, the sticks and bricks, the site, and what's funny, maybe because I didn't do it, I revere it even more. I think you kind of like revere and boost up what you haven't done. So tell us a little bit about your background, how you went from maybe some of this construction focus into investment and I believe some coaching.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the construction side, it could be a blessing and a curse. And the blessing is that I came from a construction background back in like the late 80s, early 90s. I was actually in the electrical construction, plumbing, heating, HVAC field. And so I did that for a little while. And then of course, when you're in those trades, you develop a lot of competency in other areas. So anything from, masonry, laying block and brick and pouring concrete and you name it, I've been involved in it. But the blessing is I could do it and I could perhaps save some money if I'm working on a property. The other blessing is I know what's involved. I know what things cost. I know how long things take. So that helps me vet contractors and estimates and statements of work, that sort of thing. The curse is, so I know how to do it and I could do it. And I used to carry a tool belt with me. And that's not a way to scale a real estate business.
Yeah. The who not how notion. I don't know if you've read the book, but
I'm
sure you're familiar with the idea. But I think we struggle with, getting out of what we came from. So my parallel to that would be appraisal. Appraisal is like a killer skill set. I had to do all asset classes, office, industrial, retail, golf courses, marinas, whatever. And so the blessing is I feel like I can jump into different asset classes. I can understand their cash flows. I can understand the drivers of value and move on. But the curse is that's not really where my job now is not to park myself in front of 5 screens and be really an analyst, right? So, I mean, that's not the role. That's not the role that I have anymore. So, but I get tempted to just throw my whole day into like going into the matrix like Neo and the green screen and just playing around in Excel. When in reality, I need to call the damn broker. I need to go see the property. I need to be talking to investors. I need to be talking to lenders. And I need to be thinking about my strategic assumptions and things like that. So it's all helpful. But this construction background, were you like seeing some of the other guys in the industry or gals doing the deals, making the money? What gave you that insight to say, I want to jump out of this swimming lane and maybe paddle in the one next to me?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like two lifetimes apart because, I'll date myself a little bit by saying, yeah, I'm working in the late 80s, early 90s in the construction field. And that was, coming out of high school, the thought of college, I was going to more of a technical school. I got a 2-year degree in the trades. It allowed me to go out, work, make some money. And while I was doing it, I was just like, you know what? This is it. I mean, there's got to be more. And so I decided after a few years to go back to school, get an engineering degree. That kind of took me different places. Eventually, fast forward to early 2000s, and I was working in management consulting, IT, and I decided, I got a little inspired by a relative who had been doing this in the Columbus, Ohio area as a side thing. He was doing it more in the retirement philosophy of, hey, I'm just going to spend my time buying these homes. I've got skills. I'm going to fix them up. I'm going to, hold them and put tenants in place. He wasn't really flipping, but he wanted to hold properties. And I started thinking, man, that's a pretty cool idea. I have the know-how, I have the background, I've got some cash. If I could start buying properties, maybe I can make a go at this. And that was like 2001-ish. And right about that time, even though I started getting educated, reading books and webinars, things like that, I ended up having my kids. So I've got twin boys that are almost 21 now. And that kind of absorbed a ton of time. I had a new job. There was so many life changes that I had to park it and put it on hold. Fast forward about 12, 13 years, 2014, and I got the bug again. And now life was kind of settled, and a colleague actually inspired me a little bit. He brought in his grandfather's autobiography. It was a book that his grandfather wrote, and he was a well-to-do real estate entrepreneur in Lubbock, Texas. And I was like, man, if a guy that was a blue-collar worker for GE can build this empire of a development company, an investment company, property management company, all these different real estate companies, I was like, I got to get started today. And I literally formed the LLC that evening after work.
Wow. I think that, human nature, we're good at modeling. You know what I mean? So like to see somebody that you know and trust and like, okay, how are they spending their time? What are they doing? Can I model that? My family, I have like mostly educators in my family. So I didn't have like a lot of like entrepreneurial influence, but I knew I had the itch from an early age. I would, this sounds kind of weird. I would flip through like Auto Trader and Boat Trader in grade school. Like I know it was before high school. And I would just like call on things that I thought were interesting. It was kind of like a little bit pre-internet as we know it. And just start negotiating with adults over things I was not going to buy, like a John boat or a CJ5 Jeep. And so is that a little bit weird? Yeah, but I guess I kind of had it early. And and for you to have that model and to inspire you, and like you said, I believe it was a passive investment, and you're like, oh, can we make a full active run at this? So, engineering, IT consulting, construction before that, they're helpful. I mean, they're all part of this wild world of real estate and entrepreneurialism. But how did you start first folding these together? What was kind of like your first like entrepreneurial step?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you pointed it out because a lot of skills anybody develops in life can be translatable into something like investing in real estate. And not just investing, maybe that's a good distinction, but being more on the entrepreneur side, right? Because you can invest if your goal is is to make a better return than perhaps what you're getting in the stock market or crypto or whatever other asset class you're investing in. If you want to make a business out of it and spend your time there and grow a business, well, that's the entrepreneurial track. And I always knew I had that in me. I wanted to do that, and I wanted to make it a business and not just an investment. But there's nothing wrong if somebody just, wants to be passive and place their capital and let their capital work for them. But I think if you're on the entrepreneurial side, take those skills, find out what interests you and where your passions are, and you can always improve skills in other areas once you get into the business. So a great example might be, okay, so I started by taking a single family home and placing a tenant in there and becoming a landlord. Boom. I didn't know everything. I knew enough about maybe analyzing a deal, doing the Excel gymnastics, right? I knew about negotiations. I knew enough to do renovations. I renovated the property all by myself. That was a little bit of a mistake because I sucked so much time, but I don't regret it because I had a much better appreciation for everything that goes into it, right? And where to spend money and not spend money. So I think that the key is just start somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that one thing you touched on is even if you're spending time in things that ultimately are not going to be your core concentration, it's going to at least start to limit or close the door on some of these blind spots. So like, am I still doing third-party legal services? I did title and escrow for 7 years. Just stopped that about a year ago. Tons and tons of commercial investment brokerage, tons and tons and tons of commercial appraisal. Am I doing any of those things more than just like kind of a la carte here and there now? No, I'm essentially all investor. So, but it's still great because somebody like with you, somebody can probably throw a construction schedule in front of you, and you might not have generated one recently, but boy, can you call BS, or you can identify things. You don't have to kick that off to somebody else, hope that their review is correct. And like with me, I can get through a contract quickly, underwriting quickly. I'm good on brokerage style conversations. I generally know what to say and not to say, although I have a habit of going way off script. But you see where I'm going with this. It's this like cornucopia of skill sets. And I think some people, it's like this winding path that takes you to where you are. But, I just had we had an episode drop. I think it dropped this week. And with Marie Mays, she's the Washington State, she directs this entrepreneurial program within the business college. And I asked her a question about like her best. Well, I didn't say best, but I said like your students, like what separates your students that are like super high achieving after graduation and those that just kind of fizzle. And I probably use more diplomatic words for the interview, but she talked about cross-disciplinary students. So she's like, when I get someone from, I would call it STEM, like your science, your engineers, your math people, when they get drawn to come over and start taking some business courses, or maybe they're going to double major or they want to like minor in business, she's like, these cross-discipline guys or gals, they're some of the best. She said like they routinely will outperform the person who's just like a single track, like business from the day they were born. I think there's a variety of reasons why, but to your point, these cross-disciplinary, cross-background people can often be very high achievers.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about it is when you look at sort of this life cycle of real estate, all the things we're talking about, there's so many things involved. And who, not how, right? You don't have to do everything. In fact, you're not going to excel at things that you're not passionate about. But how do you know what you're passionate about until you start doing some of these things, getting exposed to them? So fast forward from my first single family home in 2014 to 9 years later, where we are here in 2023. Actually, in the next month, I should bump up that number you said, 900, to around, let's call it 1150-ish. And thank you. The only point in saying that is, so I've gotten myself involved in a lot more deals and different asset class in multifamily. But what I learned through this process is I really don't love having my face buried in Excel. I'm good at it, but I don't really enjoy it. I'm not a big underwriter. I think that that's a great skill set, but it's not really for me. I much more appreciate and enjoy getting out there and doing events, webinars, podcasts like this, talking to investors, attracting capital to deals, and then working with overall investor relations once we actually close on a deal and we're off and operating it. That is really enjoyable to me. It's a different skill set.
It is, and it's not one, at least that not one that I'm aware of that somebody is specifically trained to do. Things are quickly evolving. There's different coaching programs and things like that now, and maybe we can jump into that. But in your traditional tracks, like I was a history major. I don't mention that very often. I'm not ashamed of it at all. But history major to law school, and I became a commercial real estate appraiser in my 20s, and that's kind of like added that fork of investment analysis. So, but all I'm getting at is like you talk about investor relations, attracting capital, this forward facing media stuff. I mean, how would you have done this back in the day? I mean, you would have had to be like, what, in the AV club, or like, I don't know, like broadcasting. I don't know. To my knowledge, there's not even a way. You just kind of have to start doing it. So, all I'm getting at is like this winding road, and here you are, and you had to figure out like, I don't want to be staring at, the green screen all day, or I don't want to be diving through the documents. Are you qualified to do it? It sounds like you are, especially when it comes to some of this construction stuff. So you start to figure out your core competencies and your passions, and that's kind of where we left off. And then, that 12-hour day starts to feel like a 4-hour day because you're working within your strengths versus the guy who does, I bet if we buried you in Excel for 4 hours, that might feel like 12 hours. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but getting someone to work within their passion and core competency.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of it, every time you say yes, you say no to something else. So some of it, I think you have to intentionally either turn down or turn off, like the construction side for me. And not just construction, but it literally, I remember kind of a defining moment. I had my second multifamily property, and on my first one, I spent a lot of time there. I was there every weekend, and I was doing a lot of the renovations myself, kind of alongside with some contractors. But by the time I got to my second one, I was almost the maintenance guy. I think my tenants saw me so much, they sometimes thought I was the maintenance guy. And so I'm driving to the property on a Sunday, and my property manager calls me up and she says, "Hey, Tony, we've got, tenant in unit 12, and she's got an issue with her toilet. She says she can't flush, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, you know what? I'm 30 minutes away. I got this. I got the tool belt in the back of the truck. Just tell her somebody will be there in 30 minutes. And about 10 minutes later, as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, no way. I called her back. I said, call the plumber. I know it's a Sunday. It's going to be time and a half. It's going to cost me an arm and a leg to fix something really simple. But I didn't sign up for this to be the maintenance guy.
Yeah.
So the funny moment, I took the tools out of the truck so I wouldn't be tempted. And that was the last time I was the maintenance guy.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're probably already handy, coming up through some of the trades, at least. Myself, not. Yeah, I can do some things, and I can YouTube and maybe change a toilet and put in a fixture and hang a fan, but it's kind of a blessing, because I just know it's not my core competency. I have never been one of those guys where I'm like super tempted to do all the physical things myself. I've heard of guys though that like sell all their tools. There's some bigger names like Brandon Turner and stuff like that. I talked about, I don't know if he sold them all, but like essentially like purging the workbench. So you're not even tempted to go do something that you can outsource, depending on what it is. It might be a $10 an hour task, and you're like, well, should I be doing that right now? I can make a 15-minute phone call. I could, whatever it is, I could make an appearance on a show. I could come up with, media, whatever it is you're trying to do. So I think you were wise to reach that conclusion. So now it sounds like the tool belt has been put away. Maybe you still have the tools, but you're not swinging hammers, you're not turning wrenches. What is your, this unit count that you've worked your way into? If you said it, forgive me, but how did you get introduced into multifamily and start to scale? And was that role more as an LP, GP, hybrid? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So 2018 was my inflection point. I realized that, hey, this single family rental business is going really, really well. It's very predictable. I was cookie cuttering these properties, but I was like one unit at a time. And for me, I was only doing about four a year just because I wanted to single thread them financially. And so I'm thinking, how many years do I have to get this, whatever it was, $250, $300 of cash flow and, a little bit of appreciation on the property. I said, there's got to be a better way to scale this. So I said, I'm going all in. I packaged up my single family homes. I sold that portfolio to a single investor. I 1031 exchanged into my first multifamily. Now, I didn't know how to buy multifamily. I bought it like a single family, which meant I opened my checkbook and had a budget of whatever I could afford based on where I was coming out of that single family portfolio. I didn't know anything about syndications and raising capital and things like that. So I drew a radius. I wanted to be, again, hands-on at that point, 2 hours away from where I'm based, which is in the Houston, Texas area. And I called up a commercial broker friend of mine. He took me out. We started looking at properties. Fast forward a few months, and I had my first 20-unit apartment complex, which I thought was a pretty good start. But again, very hands-on, and it was all me as far as the finances, and I stretched myself as far as I could go. But the good thing was 3 years later, we went full cycle on it, and it was all me on the profits. And so that was very rewarding. Yep, it was like a 31% IRR on that deal.
Nice.
And so it was worth the pain.
Yeah.
But it got me into the multifamily business. And it was 1 year after that deal that I got into my second deal. So kind of the law of the first deal, if you will. It does make a difference. That one was a syndication. And it was, how do I say it? Kind of a diluted syndication, if you will, because I only had me and a KP. And I had 26 limited partners in the deal. But again, I was still doing all the work. My other GP really just wanted to be a loan guarantor and not really be active in the operations of the property. We served as a mentor, which is great, but still another learning opportunity before I really took off. And now I'm on my ninth multifamily.
Interesting. So you sold your single family portfolio as a single sale or a portfolio sale, 1031 into the 20 unit, which you ran, like you said, almost like with like a single family landlord mindset, roll up your sleeves, do it all. And so it sounds like, 3 years later, you sell for that 30% plus return and you go into, really what you're doing now. Is that kind of the deal where you switched? And that's where it's like, okay, now I am an investor. I manage assets. I don't change toilets. And I think you said you had like 20, did you say you have like 20 something limited partners on that deal?
26 on that one. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Did you run that one as a 506c or were these like more like a buddy fund? Were they more friends and family?
It was a 506B.
Gotcha.
So I was learning everything I could about syndications back then. And, you mentioned mentoring and coaching communities out there. So I was resistant to that. It took me a long time to eventually join a program. But while I was in that resistance phase, I shadowed some guys from one of the groups and I went to all their local meetings and just learned and soaked up as much as I could. I built my own underwriting model to emulate what I was seeing that they were using and so forth. So it really got me to understand syndications. But the moment that I, got the attorney to kind of finalize all the legal docs, and I was like, okay, here we go, kicking off the capital raise. Never done it. I had no idea what to expect, and it was going to be all on my shoulders. That was a little intimidating, but
Very intimidating.
yeah, we ended up raising about 1.4 million, and I didn't know if that was good or bad. Looking back on it, I think that was pretty good,
It
especially for
is.
my first time.
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, that was kind of the benchmark. And then as I started getting into more deals, I honed in on what's my passion. And while that second deal, my first indication, I was the asset manager, I was the construction manager. I mean, that property we bought 3 months before COVID, so tons of learning opportunities on that one. But I learned where my lane is. And so I don't really enjoy the asset management. I can do it and I advise on it in some of my deals, but mostly I focus on the investor relations, attracting capital.
Well, that's a worthwhile topic. Attracting investors, especially as we're recording in spring, early summer 2023. It's a busy world out there in media land. What do you find? And like, things are constantly evolving. There's always something new, maybe a new platform, maybe a new technique. What do you like that fits your style, fits your personality for investor attraction?
You're saying like the kinds of deals I like?
No, the actual attracting they're humans at the end of the day. So just the individuals, you must have your own style, your own media, your own forum,
Oh,
but a
yeah,
way where you're like, okay, this is my way. Because everyone's a little bit different, Some people still love the good
yeah.
old fashioned cold call. Some people want to do like a lead magnet in a funnel, and it's always a little. And some things are tried and true. I'm just kind of curious because it sounds like you've spent some time on yourself figuring out what you like and what you don't like, and how you're going to spend your time.
Yeah, no, that's a great observation. I think for me, the way I approach it is I'm always working on the next deal in front of me, not the one that I have at that moment in time. So in other words, if I have a deal and you and I were to get together and you might even be interested in the deal, I'm not trying to get you to invest in this deal right now. What I'm trying to do is educate you, build rapport, build a relationship so that when I have the next deal in 3 months, 6 months, etc., you're much better prepared and you're very interested in that next deal because I wasn't trying to sell you on this deal.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I
So
think that's smart.
it's education. I mean, some people are maybe investing in their first syndication and they need more hand holding. They need to really dig in and understand it. And maybe even once they do, it's emotional. So they might need to just kind of sit back and let that stew a little bit. And then maybe the next one. This is no exaggeration. I've literally had people that I've kept warm for 27 years. I have one investor that's investing in my deal right now that I started working with 27 years ago. And he's kind of followed me and just observed, that I'm doing the right things. And, people are investing in people, not necessarily just deals. So he's kind of followed me and you never know, people are watching, people are observing what you're doing. But, I could tell you, a handful, half a dozen of those similar stories. I've got guys from college and high school and now they're investing in deals of mine.
Mm-hmm.
So you just got to keep doing the right things.
Yeah, I think that the not like staying power is one thing I'll talk about where it's just okay, you meet Tony 10 years ago. Okay, and he's got maybe I don't know if this timeline works, but maybe you have your single family portfolio banging along, and then they meet you like at a wedding or a reception or whatever it is, a meetup, and like, oh no, not anymore. I sold those. I 1031 into an apartment. What? What's that? Tell me about that. So you're showing like new skills, new acumen, new development. Then they see you a few years later. Oh, I heard you on a podcast, or I heard you on this. What are you doing now? Oh, well, I'm in syndications. I'm raising money. You can actually invest with me in this, 100-unit multifamily deal in Texas or whatever. So what I'm getting at is, like, by staying in the game and having that staying power, there's credibility that you don't even necessarily have to speak. It's like, to the contrary, if you meet somebody and they're doing something like new and unrelated every time you meet them, like I might love you to death, but there's like no way I'm pulling out my checkbook or wiring money into like your next venture. You've been all over the place, man. But when you have like this staying power, this longer term hold, people like inherently, they're like, well, Tony wouldn't still be doing this 10 years later if it wasn't working, and that's kind of the world I'm starting to come into. I've been in real estate 17 years, but investing, I think this is the 8th year. So, but the same deal. I hope that at 16 and 24 and however many years down the road, I'm hoping it's only easier as long as I'm still in the game, which I plan on being in. But to your point, it's like by showing that track record. It doesn't matter if you have a diversity in background and experience. It can be law, brokerage, appraisal. It can be construction, consulting, IT. But as long as it has like a trajectory to it and you're still in it, I think that it carries weight with investors.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you're doing this as a hobby, that's tough, right? If you're bringing in capital from other folks, because they need to know that you're all in on this, that this is your livelihood, and that you are a good steward of their capital. So, that's just some of the words I live by. And yeah, this is my livelihood. I'm doing everything I can to protect investor capital and provide returns. And that means being on podcasts. It means doing a local meetup that we do every couple of months. We bring people in and educate them, and introduce them to other folks in the industry. There's just a number of things that I do to give back to the industry.
All right, I think that's a good segue. All right, Tony, on the education side, what, I know when, your track record, I mean, you've been in the game a little while, a multi-decade run. You're going to have naturally people call you, they're going to want your opinion, they're going to want your advice. Have you formalized that into like a platform? You said meetups. It sounds like you're actually running or hosting a meetup. Tell us about like kind of the giving back, the education, and that component of your life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I participate in education mentoring programs as well. So I'll just kind of put it out there as a little plug. I joined the Jake and Gino program about 2 years ago. And I looked at many other programs. That one I really felt was a good fit culturally. So that's something for folks just to consider too, is, the education's probably going to be similar in a lot of these programs, but you have to really think about the community that you're looking to join into, and the relationships, the partnerships that might develop from that. That's important to me, and still is. Now, since then, my business has evolved in lots of different ways. Yes, I have a formal meetup we started about a year and a half ago. It's called MAIN, which stands for the Multifamily Apartment Investors Network. And so we launched that in, I guess, the beginning of 2022. We do that every 2 months. I have a couple of partners that join me in that. So we do that. Now, I also started a coaching business. My coaching business is sort of two different tracks. First of all, it's called Grit to Growth. And the two tracks are my entrepreneurs and my experienced business owners. And I'll spend more time on the entrepreneur side, but quickly on the business owners, that is, when I say experienced business owners, somebody who has already been off and running with a full-time business. They're not just kind of doing a little side hustle, but they actually have a business, perhaps employees and so forth, and they're looking to drive additional revenues and accelerate profits. That's where I come in. I have an entire program that I offer around that. On the entrepreneur side, I really work with those people who have that side hustle, who maybe just got started in something like real estate. They're working a W-2 job somewhere and they're trying to find a way to take that side hustle and make it the full-time gig. And then once they get there, this sort of promised land, it's tough. And you go through different cycles of self-doubt, and you're trying things, you're validating, testing things, and you're seeing success, and then you're not. And so it's not just business, but business, personal, it all kind of blends together. And so I feel like that is just a journey that I've taken, and I'd like to be able to share that with people. And so I do coach entrepreneurs, and I can leave you the URL and put it in the show notes. But again, it's Grit to Growth.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that Grit to Growth is in the show notes. And for those that are interested in checking out your platform and be getting involved and getting some coaching from you, was the first, I'm familiar. I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. So I believe, and this is kind of funny, they're so close, but I haven't really done anything with them. The Jake and Gino platform, aren't they down like in St. Augustine, or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, Gino's based there, and Jake
Okay.
is in Knoxville.
Is where?
He's in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Oh, Knoxville. Okay. Yeah.
But
All right.
Gino and the crew are in St. Augustine. Yeah.
Gino and the crew. Awesome. Yeah. It's been on my running list. It's funny because I got into, call this, your thought leadership world. I just been a one-off maverick wolf doing my own thing forever. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to just kind of, instead of taking one-off text messages and calls here and there, I'm going to open up a platform where, kind of a one-to-many. And that's kind of what led to the podcast and getting a little more active on social. And it's been fun. I went into it with really no preconceived notions of what it would become. And it's been a fun ride. I get to talk to guys with, your kind of background and meet interesting people. What I'm going to say, though, is it's been almost entirely virtual because I launched it during COVID. So there were, even living in the Freedom State of Florida, there were still an absence of physical meetups, and people were doing. There were some organizations I was involved in the real estate legal community that they like just started doing physical stuff like in 23. So, I mean, but my point is I do really on a personal level, I love the virtual, but I like can't get enough of kind of like the face-to-face when it's available. So, and I was going to ask you a question too about like, with what makes kind of like an ideal grit candidate for you? What kind of person, kind of fits your avatar, if you will?
Somebody who's going to put in the work. That's for sure. Because when my clients are successful, I'm successful. So I need somebody who is willing to be coachable, first of all. Okay. I don't know everything, and certainly they don't know everything if they're seeking coaching. They're looking for education, they're looking for guidance. But I'm not just a mentor. I'm there to really look at the person and to understand what's going on, what's perhaps driving them, what are the challenges, what are the limiting beliefs, and really try to help them work through that. And if somebody's willing to put in the work, then they're going to get the growth.
One of my favorite, and I've done some higher ticket masterminds, and I think one of my takeaways, there are many, would be the monetary investment triggers commitment and accountability usually. Now, if you're someone who maybe has a lot of resources and you don't mind just throwing money at things and hoping all your problems are solved, it's probably not going to do much for you. But for some of us, you're like, man, if it's thousands of dollars and it only works if I put time and effort in, it's going to make a difference, like how much money I put in and how much time I put in. And I know for me personally, if I invest in like a high ticket mastermind, it's unlikely that I'm going to like miss the Zoom calls or not participate like in the chat platforms. And sometimes I'm guilty of that when I get sidetracked, but also the people in the communities. If it's a paid community, this is just my opinion on paid versus unpaid communities. I love free education, and there's so much more than ever. You can learn so much, but to have like an actual peer-to-peer environment, like an ecosystem where you're really going to grow and learn together, in my opinion, it's unlikely that's going to come from a free platform. The free platforms tend to get like glutted with what bots and trolls and what, maybe they're not bots, maybe they're real people, but maybe they're just in there making nonsense comments. They're not facilitating growth. They don't have aligned mindsets. Maybe they did not go through a screening process, where like your high quality groups, even if it's a lower budget peer-to-peer group coaching or something, at least those people like filled out an application, had some onboarding, paid a little bit of money. Those are going to be people, they're not just there to mess with each other. They're there to kind of grow and have an outcome. So I'll probably pause there, but that's been one epiphany. I consumed a ton of free information for years and it was all good. I think actually podcasting is one of the best ways to take information in for free. But I think if you really want to have like a personal growth where someone's going to look at you, the expression, you can't read the label from inside the bottle. Well, you're going to have to get into a group where you can get a little bit of like a reception on yourself, a little analysis, a little bit of critique from people that are trying to grow with you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, money's a big motivator, but it can also be an obstacle. And I remember I said that I resisted, right, for years. I'm sitting there looking at these programs going, wow, 20, 30, 40 plus thousands of dollars to join a program. And my reaction was, wow, all the things I could do with that money. I could buy that next deal. I can get into this partnership, blah, 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 right? You talk yourself out of it. But then as I'm observing people who have been in these communities, I'm like, but they just took off. They became very successful very quickly because they had a tribe. The idea that proximity is power. You start associating yourself with people who have done what you're trying to do, and all of a sudden it seems easier. And this, I know it's so cliche to say, multifamily is a team sport, and it is. It is. You can't grow a business. I could do a 20 unit by myself, but to go any bigger than that, I really needed partners. And you find partners in a lot of these communities. You find people that you want to work with and they want to work with you.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I think it's what you get out what you put in, which sounds cliche, but there's a reason why it's cliche, because it's freaking true. And your participation is everything. You know what I mean? Like if you're going to be a wallflower, there are very few communities where you can be a wallflower and get anything out of it. You know what I mean? I don't even know if I want to go there. I'm thinking I was raised Catholic school, nuns, the whole thing. And I'm not sure where I want to go with that, but just if I want, sitting in church, not singing, not reading along, not paying attention, elbowing the kid next to me, I'm not getting a whole lot out of it because I'm not participating. And so, but it's all about, are you putting anything in? Are you willing to be, I'd say I used the word vulnerable earlier, willing to open up a little bit, because if you're just going to close off and be a wallflower, this is not a place of growth. It's not a mindset of growth. So, yeah, I'm with you there. Now, Tony, I didn't prep you on this. Do you mind? We do a section called the Coach Brown breakdown of a sample deal. If you don't want, we'll move on, because I didn't prep you on this. But if you got a deal that you wouldn't mind breaking down for us, I'll tell you the criteria and I can repeat them. And if you don't want to do it, you can just tell me pass. But how'd you find it? How'd you fund it? How'd you fix it? And how'd you exit? So find, fund, fix, exit. So if you got one, let's rock and roll. If you don't, so be it.
Sure. I have a number, but I think probably the most pivotal one was my first multifamily. And that was that 20 unit. How did I find it? If that's the first question.
Yep, find is the first.
Yeah, that was actually a bit of I guess I'll use the word pivot. Because I was under contract on another property, totally different part of the city. And it took months and months and months. And finally, it fell apart. Seller just, we couldn't get there with them. And so I'm kicking myself, just trying to say, self-doubt. I can't get into the next multifamily deal. How am I going to do this? And boom, that week, I see a property that fit all my criteria, and it just kind of showed up at the right point in time. It just, it was in the right location. It was in a better location actually than the previous one. It was more units. It was 20 versus 16. It's just so many things. So sometimes when a door closes, just keep your eyes open because the next one is coming. But that deal, we ended up doing kind of a traditional bank loan on it, and worked with a local lender that loved the idea of keeping an asset in their portfolio. Literally, the president of the bank, he came out, visited the property, and gave him a tour. So it was that kind of small town feel.
Okay, so the funding I recall from our earlier portion of this show, you had your 1031, and did that cover all the equity that you needed?
Good question. So 1031, I actually made a little bit of a mistake on my first 1031. And so we won't go too deep into that, but I basically I took a check at the closing table.
Gotcha.
And it was just long story, but so it didn't cover everything. And so the bank gave me 80% loan to cost. So
nice.
that was great. I covered quite a bit of the acquisition and some of the renovations. Ended up being around 100K that they gave me for renovations. The problem is that was a $350,000 renovation. And again, learnings. I didn't really know that at the time. And I grossly misunderestimated some of the work that needed to be done on the property. And yeah, I had to self-fund a lot of that. Lines of credit, credit cards, you name it. My credit score was in the basement. It was awful. And it made it work. I mean, we got it done.
You got it done. And what was the, I don't know if we talked about this. It was 20 units. What was the purchase price? And you said the rehab ended up getting around like over 300. So what was the project cost? It's acquisition plus rehab.
We paid $965,000 for it. And I want to say that was like maybe 49 or so a unit. We ended up selling for about 91 a unit 3 years later.
Nice.
So we sold it for $1.8+ million. And the rehab was somewhere around 325 to 350.
All right, good for you. Now I know you did the renovation. I assume there was a correlating rent bump.
Yeah. So interesting thing, it was classic mom and pop. The guy that owned it was 82 years old. He had owned it for decades, was doing everything himself, really didn't understand what the property was worth, how much he could rent it for. Everybody was on a month-to-month lease. Everybody. And they were paying $500 a month. And we were able to basically kind of reposition the entire property at $750 a month. And then, of course, over the whole period, we continued to grow those rents. But straight out of the gate, we come in, we basically give somebody a 30-day notice because they were month to month, and come in, renovate, and $750.
Awesome.
$250 rent.
Well, we know how you exited because you told us. Biggest lesson. Now, I didn't put that. It was find, fund, fix, exit. Well, and you already told us that. Lesson. What was your takeaway on that one?
I think I probably should have been more capitalized on the front side. Some of it was out of my control. I mentioned, I know how to estimate renovations, but things that maybe you don't think about, like the property had 5 balconies, and we never would have thought anything about replacing those balconies until we had a car that backed up into one of the posts, which then exposed some cracks in the concrete, which then exposed the fact that all the wood was rotted out, and we had to completely replace all the balconies for safety reasons.
Mm.
Things like that you might not spot.
Mm-hmm.
So it is what it is, but having more capital up front would have been definitely a good idea on that. Other lessons, I did hire third-party property management, but the big lesson learned there is they should be local. I hired somebody who was an hour away. Actually, I started with somebody who was 2 hours away, and they're never going to visit the property. I mean, because it was too small to have dedicated on-site management.
Mm-hmm.
So it was managed remotely. But if they're not in the same town, they're never going there.
Yep. No, I it's like deja vu. I did a 28 unit at $500 a month rents, mom and pop. I mean, everyone's month to month. She liked everybody to be month to month. A very similar exit. So I've talked about it before. I won't go down that road, but I mean, I'm with you all the way. And there's these assets they're great, like starter multifamily. When you get out of like your duplex, triplex, quad world, and you move into like commercial multifamily, 5 units and up, these are good properties, your 12s, your 16s, your 20s, kind of like your stuff maybe under 50, and your bigger boys aren't really targeting that stuff. So I really like that, but your point is well taken. And I think the audience should hear it just one more time. It's like, you need to know at this asset size, like who's going to run it, because it's probably going to be difficult to find like a serious third-party management company to do some like one-off 20 unit. And this is another reason why some people try to aggregate smaller, I say smaller, like your 10s, your 20s, your 30s, aggregate them into something. If you get to like 100 or 80 and they're maybe within, contiguous zip codes, well, you can maybe justify like, here's one maintenance shed and this guy services all 100 units for work orders, or all the phone calls for all the leasing for all these properties goes to this phone at this person's desk. And, you see where I'm going with it. Centralized accounting.
Oh, yeah.
So you're essentially running it like it's 100 unit, but it's a scattered site. So I like that. I personally like that model. I did that up to about 40 units in Jacksonville. And then I've sold those off, but essentially aggregating the same staff to run a multi-unit little portfolio. But all right, that's awesome. Well, we're going to jump into a quick little section. I say call the play. You get to call the play. It's a resource section. I'm going to ask you a few questions. You just hit me with top of mind. What is the most impactful real estate or business book you've read?
I'm gonna answer that a couple of ways. I don't want to go down the purple Bible route, right? I think everybody's read Rich Dad Poor Dad. Absolutely impactful. Real estate wise, I think there's a really good book out there that would help anybody, whether you're being a sponsor or a limited partner passive investor in a multifamily syndication. And I'm looking across my bookshelf here. It is called Passive Investing Made Simple. So Dan Kruger and Anthony Vicino, they're actually both Jake and Gino members. I say that because that's a book that I recommend to all my investors. It just breaks down in a very lighthearted, easy to read way, everything to know about being involved in a multifamily syndication. But a mindset book that you actually mentioned, it's one of my favorites, is Who Not How. And I know this is kind of a lightning round, but I'll just say this. When I was reading the book, I had a goal to help my son buy a car by flipping a house. And all of a sudden it hit me, and I'm like, I don't want to spend all summer flipping a house, swinging a hammer. So who do I know who flips houses? And fast forward, we got it done last summer, and I spent 3 days, doing some tile work, but we didn't spend the whole summer flipping a house.
Nice. Yeah, the Who Not How is a super easy read. The audio book is easy. I mean, I highly recommend it. I'm glad you brought that one back up. It's common sense, but I think what I liked about Who Not How is it takes the burden off of, I'll speak for myself because you might not agree. sometimes I feel I was raised in a family where like the hard way is the right way. Um, you know, too much is expected from where much is given, and like kind of like that, it was like a Kennedy era Catholic mindset. And a lot of that is good and virtuous. And I'm not anti per se, but there's baggage when it comes to like not doing everything, so it's like, are you like doing 110% in every category at all times? And you're like, well, wait a minute, is that really the best way? And so what's better, and we mentioned it earlier in your episode today, is allocating 110%, if you want to call it that, all of your energy in categories that you're passionate about, where you're going to actually make a splash and enjoy it. So I think, to say it one other way, is like Who Not How gives you like a sense of relief, where it's like, it's okay to look at the things you either don't want to do or are not profitable, or likely it's both. A lot of times, if it's not profitable and you don't want to do it, by God, you should outsource that. But even if you just don't want to do it because it drains the hell out of you, even though you do know how to do it, you probably want to push that off to somebody else too, as long as you can afford it. And as long as, when you take that newfound time freedom, do something enjoyable but productive with that time. It kind of was like a relief of like, call it guilt, call it whatever, but I felt free to operate within like my quadrants of competency.
Yeah, totally, totally. But a lot of people think that book is delegation. How do I delegate? Oh, of course, we should delegate. But it's also on the reverse side of, what are you doing to be a who to somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
Right? When somebody else is faced with something and they're like, I just need to find this person to help me with this, they think of you. And
Mm-hmm.
when you know that your duty is to be a who to however many people, you specialize, you get real good at something. And, I think that helps you as well.
Now, what do you do, Tony, when you are not coaching and investing and teaching others the awesome arts that we've learned along the way? What do you do for fun?
Mm. So you probably see a few of the medals behind me
I
here.
do.
I have run 26 marathons. So running is a bit of a passion. Honestly, I don't really have this ambition anymore to just keep running marathons. I mean, I run other races too. We just actually got back from Yosemite. My wife and I ran the Yosemite half marathon. But I think there's a couple of passions in there. I do enjoy running for the sake of running. It's great to get out there on a Saturday morning and knock out some miles with friends and talk about whatever, real estate, or some people joke it's cheaper than therapy. You just get out there with like-minded people, and it's cathartic. But the marathons, the only thing goal-wise on the marathon that I really have is, I'm a legacy member of the Houston Marathon, which means I've run more than 10 Houston marathons. In fact, I've run 19 Houston marathons. The geek in me says that there's 385 people on the planet Earth who have run more Houston marathons than me. And and that's a little spark to keep
Yeah.
me going every year. So kind of cool.
So you are just a little bit competitive. Yeah.
I'm far from competitive. My PR days are behind me.
Uh-huh.
But you mentioned the word longevity, a while back. There is something to say about sticking with something like that. And, you know, that's one for me.
That's awesome. All right. Well, we kind of jumped into some of your platform and content stuff earlier, but let's make sure we know, where can people connect and learn more about you and what you do?
So they can always reach me via email at Tony, Tony, at Novo, Novo, multifamilygroup.com. That's my real estate website and email address. And then the coaching one is a little harder to get out there, but it's Tony at Grit to Growth with hyphens in between. So grit dash to dash growth.com.
Doesn't sound too tricky at all. Grit to growth with hyphens. We can do that. All right, guys. I've enjoyed our time with Tony. I hope you did too. If you did, please rate, review, subscribe, share with a friend. This information can be super impactful in people's lives, and it's got to get to their ears. So do it. Makes a huge difference. Allows us to bring you more and more improved content. If you're into socials, we are Yield Coach on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We put frequent deal opportunities out there, bonus content, and inside looks into our personal and professional pursuits. But guess what? That's a wrap on this show. I'm your coach, Ian Brown, signing off and reminding everybody to lace up and leave it all on the field. Yield Coach out.